Alex Eala. Cincinnati Stadium 3. She has spent the last few weeks proving that the attention around her is not some social media illusion. And yet, when she opens her Cincinnati campaign, she will not walk onto center court. She will walk onto Stadium 3. About 4,000 seats. That is where this story gets interesting. Only days earlier in Toronto, tournament officials faced the opposite problem. Alex had been connected to a grandstand with about 2,800 seats. Tournament director Carl Hale said the expected demand around her match could go beyond 5,000 tickets. Toronto reacted and moved her to center court. Now Cincinnati gets the next test. Is Stadium 3 big enough for the audience Alex Eala can bring? Did the tournament underestimate how quickly her popularity has grown? Or is this simply a normal scheduling decision that looks more dramatic because of what happened in Toronto? There is another detail. On the morning of the match, the official practice schedule puts Alex on center court at 9 inches the morning. Her opponent, Elena Gabriela Ruse, is scheduled to practice on Stadium 3. Then, 2 hours later, they are supposed to meet on that same Stadium 3. That does not prove anything by itself. But it makes the situation impossible to ignore. Alex is the number 17 seed. She is number 20 inches the world. She has a WTA title. She has Filipino fans showing up in real numbers across North American tournaments. And Cincinnati clearly knows who she is. So why Stadium 3? Maybe 4,000 seats will be more than enough. Maybe the match fits perfectly there. Maybe the entire debate disappears once the first ball is struck. But if the court fills early, and if fans struggle to get inside, Cincinnati may learn the same lesson Toronto learned only days earlier. And there is another reason this could become uncomfortable very quickly. Ruse is not arriving cold. She has already played in Cincinnati. And what she just did should get the attention of every Alex Eala fan. To understand why this match matters, you have to understand how quickly Alex changed her own status. A few weeks ago, she was still fighting to prove that the breakthrough was real. Now, she is number 20 inches the world. She is 21 years old. She is left-handed. She is the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in history. And she is no longer entering tournaments as the interesting young outsider people can ignore until she creates an upset. That version of Alex Eala is disappearing. The new version arrives with expectations. She arrives with a seed beside her name. She arrives with a WTA title. And she arrives with people checking the court assignment before the match even begins. Her 2026 season already stands at 37 wins and 19 losses. That is 56 matches before her Cincinnati campaign even starts. But numbers alone do not explain the change. Washington does. That tournament changed the conversation. Alex did not win by moving through a quiet section of the draw. She went through names tennis fans already know. Zheng Qinwen, Leylah Fernandez, Alina Svitolina, Naomi Osaka. Then Jessica Pegula in the final. Pegula had the experience, the ranking, and the home country advantage. Alex lost the first set, 6-4. Then the match changed. Alex took the second set, 6-4. And in the third, she did not survive. She dominated. 6-love. Against Jessica Pegula. That made Alex Eala the first Filipino player to win a WTA singles title. That result alone would have been enough to make Cincinnati pay attention. But something else was happening around the court. Filipino fans were not just following scores online. They were showing up. Flags appeared in the stands. The noise grew whenever Alex needed a point. Sections of an American tournament started feeling less neutral every time she built momentum. After the Washington final, even Pegula acknowledged the Filipino support around Eala. That matters because professional tennis is not only about rankings. It is also about attention. Which players make fans arrive early? Which names make people search the schedule before buying a ticket? Which matches make a normal session feel like an event? Alex is suddenly becoming part of that conversation. Then came Toronto. And that is where the crowd question became impossible to dismiss. The original grandstand was not considered enough for the expected demand around her match. Toronto moved Alex to center court. That is the important part. Not because every Alex Eala match now deserves the biggest stadium. Not because a smaller court is automatically disrespectful. Because a tournament had already seen her audience become larger than the original plan. Now move forward only a few days. Different city. Different tournament. Cincinnati. Alex arrives as number 20 inches the world and the number 17 seed. Her opening match goes to Stadium 3. About 4,000 seats. To be clear, that is not a tiny court, it is a serious stadium. The question is not whether Alex deserves something more glamorous. The real question is simpler. Is 4,000 enough? That question becomes even more interesting when you look at the player waiting across the net. Elena Gabriela Ruse has already played a full match in Cincinnati. She beat Magda 6-love, 6-3. The match lasted 79 minutes. Ruse converted 6 of 8 break points. This was not a messy escape. She looked sharp, fast, controlled. Now she gets Alex. And that changes the pressure immediately. Alex received a first-round bye because of her seeding. Normally, that sounds like a pure advantage. More rest. Less physical stress. One fewer match. But there is another side. Ruse has already felt the Cincinnati court under her shoes. She has already adjusted to the bounce. She has already served under match pressure. She has already returned against a live opponent. Alex has not. So, which advantage matters more? Fresh legs? Or match rhythm? That answer may reveal itself in the first 15 minutes. If Alex starts quickly, the bye looks perfect. If she starts slowly and Ruse begins striking cleanly, the same bye becomes part of the tension. Because Ruse does not need time to discover what Cincinnati feels like. She already knows. And if you have been following this rise from Washington to Toronto and now Cincinnati, stay with this story. Because the court assignment is only half of the problem. The other half is an opponent who already looks comfortable. Then comes the strangest detail of the day. The practice schedule. Alex is listed on center court at 9 inches the morning. Ruse is listed on Stadium 3. The same court where the match will be played. That does not mean Ruse suddenly has some massive advantage. But think about what she gets. She sees the space behind the baseline. She feels the bounce. She gets the sight lines. She sees how the sun hits the court. She becomes familiar with the place where the match is actually happening. Alex gets the biggest practice court. Ruse gets the match court. Which one would you rather have before the first point? This is what makes the matchup more dangerous than the rankings suggest. Alex is the seed. Alex is the top 20 player. Alex is the new WTA champion. But Ruse may enter the opening games with the simpler job. She has already competed here. She has already won here. She has already practiced on the match court. And she is arriving after dropping a 6-love set on an experienced opponent. Now imagine the opening games. Alex misses a few returns. Ruse holds comfortably. Alex is still adjusting to the court speed. Ruse already looks settled. Suddenly, a routine opening round match becomes uncomfortable. That is the danger of small advantages in tennis. One previous match sounds minor. One practice court sounds minor. One slow start sounds minor. But matches can turn when several small advantages arrive at the same time. And this is not the first time Ruse has stood in the way of Alex Eala. They have history. Ruse beat Alex during US Open qualifying in 2024. Alex won the first set, 6-3. Then Ruse turned the match around. 6-1. 6-4. 2 years later, they meet again. But almost everything around Alex has changed. The ranking. The confidence. The expectations. The crowd. The pressure. Ruse knows what it feels like to beat the old version of Alex Eala. Now she gets the version ranked number 20 inches the world. So, which memory matters more? Ruse knowing she has beaten Alex before? Or Alex knowing she is no longer the same player Ruse beat 2 years ago? That is where the real match begins. At this point, it would be easy to say, Cincinnati simply underestimated Alex. Maybe they did. But that conclusion may be too easy. Because there is no solid evidence that Cincinnati is disrespecting Alex Eala. In fact, one detail makes that argument much harder to defend. Alex is practicing on center court. If the tournament wanted to hide her, reduce her visibility, or treat her like an unimportant name, giving her a center court practice slot would be a strange way to do it. And major names are spread around tournament grounds all the time. That is normal. So, maybe Stadium 3 is not an insult. Maybe the real story is not about disrespect. Maybe the real story is growth. Did Alex Eala become more popular faster than the tournament schedule could predict? That is a much more interesting question. Think of a rising artist booked into a venue that looked huge when the plan was made, only for the audience to grow faster than anyone expected. The original decision was not necessarily wrong. The demand simply changed. That could be what we are watching with Alex. Washington changed her status. Toronto changed expectations around her crowd. Her ranking reached number 20. Her name became harder to ignore. And tournaments cannot rebuild an entire schedule every time a player catches fire. Court assignments involve television windows, ticketing, security, timing, practice access, player recovery, and many other moving parts. So Cincinnati may have made a completely reasonable decision. A 4,000-seat stadium is not small. For an early round match, it is a major stage. But Alex may be reaching the point where reasonable is no longer enough. That is the twist. The problem may not be where Cincinnati placed her. The problem may be how quickly the audience around her is changing. And there is another possibility. A smaller stadium could actually help Alex. Think about the crowd. On a huge court, thousands of people can still feel spread out. There is distance. There is space. Noise has somewhere to go. On a tighter court, every reaction feels closer. Every cheer hits harder. Every flag becomes easier to see. Every breakpoint feels more personal. If Filipino fans fill large sections of Stadium 3, the atmosphere could become intense very quickly. Not because there are 12,000 people, because 4,000 people packed close to the court can sound much bigger than the number suggests. At first, the word backfire sounds like a problem for Cincinnati. Maybe fans cannot get in. Maybe demand exceeds capacity. Maybe people ask why Alex was not placed on the biggest court. But what if the real backfire is for Ruse? What if Stadium 3 becomes exactly the kind of environment Alex wants? A close crowd. Concentrated noise. Philippine flags around the court. Every important point followed by an immediate reaction. Ruse has already practiced there. That gives her familiarity. But familiarity and crowd pressure are not the same thing. You can know the bounce and still feel a match moving away when the stadium starts leaning toward the player on the other side. That is why this situation is difficult to predict. A smaller court could limit Alex. Or it could magnify her. And this is where I want your answer. If you were Alex, would you rather play on center court with more space and more seats? Or Stadium 3 with a tighter crowd and potentially much more concentrated energy? Tell me in the comments, because the obvious answer may not be the right one. There is another layer here. Alex is no longer entering matches with nothing to lose. She has a title now. She has a top 20 ranking. She has a seed beside her name. People expect her to win matches like this. That pressure is new. But a loud crowd can change how that pressure feels. Instead of walking onto court feeling that everyone expects proof, she can walk out feeling that thousands of people are already with her. That matters against an opponent like Ruse. Ruse has confidence. Ruse has rhythm. Ruse has history against Alex. Ruse has time on the match court. If this match were played in a quiet environment, those details could feel enormous. But if Stadium 3 fills with Eala supporters, the emotional balance changes. Now Ruse is not only trying to beat the number 20 player in the world. She is trying to beat her in an environment that may feel like it belongs to Alex. That is where Washington and Toronto become useful evidence. Not because we need to repeat every ticket number. Because they showed two different things. Toronto showed that real demand exists. Washington showed what happens when those fans actually get inside. Noise. Flags. Energy. Pressure. Online popularity and stadium popularity are not the same thing. A player can trend on social media and still play in front of empty seats. A player can have millions of views and still struggle to move real tickets. Alex is showing signs of something different. People are physically showing up. That changes the value of her matches. It changes the atmosphere. And eventually, it changes the decisions tournaments have to make. The attention around Alex is also starting to move beyond the Filipino tennis community. That does not make the Filipino fanbase less important. It makes the story bigger. When Alex beats elite players, American tennis fans notice. When she wins a WTA title, casual fans notice. When she reaches number 20 inches the world, people who mainly follow the top of the rankings start seeing her name more often. Recognition becomes interest. Interest becomes ticket demand. That is how a player becomes a draw. Not in one dramatic moment. In layers, Washington gave Alex the title. Toronto gave us the demand warning. Cincinnati now gets the next test. Can Stadium 3 handle the audience that wants to see her? We do not know yet. And that uncertainty is the point. It is entirely possible that 4,000 seats are enough. It is possible that every fan gets inside. It is possible that the whole debate disappears before the second game. But if Stadium 3 fills early, if Philippine flags start covering sections of the court, and if fans are still trying to find access, Cincinnati gets a very clear piece of information. Eala is not only climbing the rankings. Her audience is climbing with her. But there is still one thing that can erase this entire conversation. The match itself. None of the crowd numbers matter if Ruse walks onto Stadium 3 and takes control. She just beat Magda Lynette, 6-love, 6-3. She has rhythm. She has history against Alex. She has practiced on the match court. And she has nothing to lose against the higher-ranked seed. Alex has to handle the first few games. She has to adjust quickly. She has to keep Ruse from turning early rhythm into scoreboard pressure. She has to manage the expectations that now follow her into matches she is supposed to win. Because if Ruse takes control, the conversation about center court disappears immediately. That is the real danger. Not the size of the stadium, not the practice schedule, not the crowd. The tennis. Alex has spent the last few weeks proving she can beat established names. Now she has to prove she can handle a different kind of challenge. A match where she is no longer the surprise. A match where the opponent already knows the conditions. A match where people expect Alex to move forward. That can be harder than an upset. When you are the underdog, pressure lives on the other side. When you become the seed, pressure begins walking onto court with you. That is the new version of Eala Cincinnati is about to see. And maybe that is why this match matters more than it looks. Ruse can test her patience. She can attack the second serve. She can make Alex work through long return games. She can use early confidence to keep the rallies aggressive. Alex, meanwhile, has to make the match about movement, left-handed patterns, depth, and pressure on Ruse before Ruse settles completely into the day. The opening games matter. If Alex breaks early, the crowd can grow into the match. If Ruse starts cleanly, the atmosphere can become tense. That first emotional swing may tell us a lot. And then there is the history. In 2024, Ruse beat Alex after Alex took the first set. That memory can work in both directions. For Ruse, it is proof. For Alex, it is evidence of how far she has come. The old Alex could take a set from Ruse. The current Alex enters as number 20 inches the world, a WTA champion, and the higher-ranked seed. That does not guarantee anything. It simply changes the meaning of the rematch. This is not revenge because a headline says so. It is a test of whether the player Alex has become can solve a problem that the younger version could not finish. And if she does, then Cincinnati may have a bigger decision waiting. Amanda Anisimova could be next in this section of the draw. That would bring another recognizable name. More attention. More pressure. Potentially more demand. At that point, the conversation changes. The question will no longer be whether Stadium 3 was enough for the opener. The question will be where Cincinnati puts Eala next. And that may be the real story of this week. Not disrespect. Not controversy. Growth. Eala is moving through professional tennis so quickly that tournaments are learning what her audience looks like in real time. Washington showed the results. Toronto showed the demand. Cincinnati may show what happens when both arrive at the same time. So could Stadium 3 backfire? Yes. But probably not in the way people first imagine. It could backfire on Cincinnati if the court cannot handle the crowd. It could backfire on Ruse if a smaller stadium concentrates thousands of Eala supporters around the match. Or, it could backfire on Alex if all the attention around the venue hides the fact that her opponent is already sharp, confident, and comfortable in Cincinnati. That is why the first few games matter so much. Watch how quickly Alex finds the return. Watch whether Ruse attacks early. Watch how the crowd reacts to the first break point. Watch whether Stadium 3 feels half full, comfortably full, or completely transformed. And most importantly, watch Alex. Because the biggest change around her is not the number beside her name. It is the expectation. People are no longer asking if she can create another surprise. They are starting to ask what happens when she is expected to win. That is a different pressure. A different challenge. And maybe the next stage of her career. If Alex beats Ruse and Stadium 3 turns into another Eala spectacle, Cincinnati will have a new question almost immediately. Where does she play next? If you want to see how that question changes after the match, stay with this story and subscribe. Because the next answer may arrive faster than anyone expects. For now, one question is already waiting. How long can Eala stay away from center court if Eala mania keeps growing?